6 men said Travis Walton vanished after a light struck him in the Arizona woods. Then he came back alive, and the case became less simple, not more. The easy version says this is just the famous abduction from Fire in the Sky. But the movie is not the case. The case begins on November 5, 1975, with a tree-thinning crew working near Turkey Springs. Travis Walton was 22 years old. He was one of 7 men riding home after a long day in the forest. The men later named in Walton's account were Michael Rogers, Alan Dalis, John Goulette, Kenneth Peterson, Steve Pierce, Dwayne Smith, and Walton himself. That is the first thing people sometimes miss. Before the beings, before the spacecraft interior, before the arguments about alien races, there was a missing person problem. 6 coworkers said one man was gone, and that is why the story never stayed inside ordinary rumor. This is No Aliens. We bring you everything we found. You decide what it means. The central question is narrow at first. What happened between the moment the crew stopped and the moment Travis Walton was no longer there? The popular story often jumps straight to aliens. That skips the part that made the case dangerous for the men involved. If Walton was not found, 6 crewmen had to explain why they left the forest without him. That pressure began almost immediately. A missing adult in the woods can be an accident, but 6 men reporting a vanished coworker after a strange light is something else. According to their account, they saw an unusual glowing object after dark. Walton got out of the truck and moved closer. Then, the witnesses described a light or beam-like effect near him. The men panicked and drove away. They said they returned soon after. Walton was gone. This is the part that resists a quick explanation. The claim is not only that one man saw something, the claim is that 6 other men had to carry the consequences of saying he disappeared. That does not prove a spacecraft took him, but it makes the beginning of the case much harder to dismiss as a private fantasy. And the timing matters. The crew did not get years to refine a legend. They had to answer questions while Walton was still missing. They had to answer while searchers were looking through cold forest. They had to answer while suspicion could turn toward them. So the first challenge is not belief versus disbelief. It is evidence versus pressure. What would make 6 men tell a story that immediately put them under suspicion? Let's start with what is grounded. The location was the Apache-Sitgreaves National Forests in Arizona. The work was a Turkey Springs tree-thinning contract. This detail matters because it gives the story a workplace setting, not a campfire setting. The men were not tourists watching the sky. They were a crew finishing a job on public forest land. The date was November 5, 1975. The first law enforcement contact is usually placed around 7:45 that evening. Navajo County officials, including Sheriff Marlon Gillespie and Deputy Kenneth Copeland, became part of the record early. That matters because the case did not stay inside the crew's truck. It crossed into public procedure while the outcome was still unknown. The crew identity is not a vague legend. Walton's own published witness material names the men in the vehicle. That matters because names create accountability. A nameless story can drift. A named story has people attached to it. The second grounded layer is the disappearance itself. Walton was not simply late for dinner. The absence turned into a search. Searches are important because they turn a claim into a public event. Reports from the period describe nearly 50 people searching the Turkey Springs area on November 7th. Accounts also describe a later search effort that included a helicopter. No confirmed trace of Walton was reported from those ground searches. That absence is evidence too, but it is not simple evidence. People had to spend time, fuel, labor, and official attention looking for him. That creates a record beyond Walton's later memory. The missing interval became the emotional center of the case. 5 days is long enough for hope to change shape. 5 days is long enough for investigators to wonder if they are looking for a living man or a body. Modern retellings usually place the call from Heber around midnight on November 12th. Older summaries sometimes vary by 1 or 2 days. That uncertainty should not be hidden. Precise mystery is stronger than polished myth. The Heber phone call is one of the case's strongest visual anchors. Several summaries say Walton placed a collect call to his sister's home. The person often named as receiving that contact was his brother-in-law, Grant Neff. That detail gives the return a chain of custody, however imperfect. It gives the return a place. It gives the story a sound. And it moves Walton from missing person file back into human contact. Then comes the third layer. Walton later claimed he woke in a hospital-like room. He described non-human beings near him. He also described fear, confusion, and a struggle to understand where he was. He described a human-like figure wearing a helmet. In later tellings, this sequence became the part people remembered most. But as evidence, it sits in a different category. A witness can sincerely describe an experience without proving the mechanism behind it. That is not a dismissal. It is how we keep the strange parts from swallowing the testable parts. Then his next grounded point was the call near Heber. This is where the movie misleads many viewers. Fire in the Sky turned the onboard scene into cinema. Walton's own account is different in tone and detail. So when someone says the movie proves or disproves the case, they are weighing the wrong object. The case also became tangled with the 1993 film's cultural footprint. For many people, the dramatization arrived before the documents. That order matters because images can overwrite testimony. The record also gets tangled with later alien race claims. One connection, sometimes made online, links the case to an ARB race called Drees. But in the material reviewed here, Walton's own published witness page does not corroborate that label. Mainstream and official sources do not appear to support it either. That does not erase Walton's described beings. It just separates the original claim from later mythology attached to it. And that separation is crucial. If everything gets blended together, the strongest parts of the case become easier to ignore. The strongest parts begin before any race label. They begin with 7 names, 1 truck, 1 forest road, and 1 missing man. They continue through a search that other people had to participate in. They continue through official suspicion because investigators had to consider whether the crew knew more than they were saying. That pressure reached the polygraph stage before Walton's return became fully absorbed into UFO culture. And they end, externally, with a frightened man making contact from Heber. Everything after that becomes more intimate and harder to measure, but the boundary itself is part of the case. It tells us where the record is strongest, and it tells us where the mystery becomes deepest. The revelation is not that one detail solves the case. The revelation is that the Walton case survives because its core is layered. It is not one story. It is 3 stories locked together. First, 6 crew witnesses describe the event that left Walton missing. Second, Walton returns with memories that move beyond ordinary missing person evidence. Third, decades of retellings, challenges, polygraphs, and interviews keep reopening the wound. The polygraphs sit inside that third layer. They matter because people remember them as part of the case's public force. Several accounts emphasize that polygraph testing became central to the public argument around the crew. The early crew testing is often described this way. 5 men were read as truthful, and one result was treated as inconclusive. That detail is one reason the case gained force so quickly. For supporters, those tests looked like pressure that the witnesses survived. For critics, the same tests became a battlefield over procedure, accuracy, and interpretation. But they do not settle the case. The national academies reviewed polygraph science and found the evidence quality for judging validity relatively low. Accuracy is not perfection. A passed test does not prove an abduction. A disputed test does not erase 6 men's original missing person account. That is the harder, stranger place to stand. The case asks us to hold different kinds of evidence at different strengths. Location, date, and crew identities are well grounded. The craft, beam, beings, and mechanism remain debated or unverified. The missing 5 days sit between those worlds. That middle position is exactly what makes the case so difficult. If Walton had returned after 5 minutes, the story would be smaller. If he had never returned, it would be a different tragedy altogether. But he did return, and he returned with a story that pulled the search record into something larger. That is why the case refused to disappear. It offers enough documentation to keep the door open, and enough uncertainty to keep the room beyond it dark. Looking back, the Travis Walton case is not clean. Maybe that is why it still matters. Clean stories are easy to file away. Messy stories keep asking for another pass. In a 2025 KJZZ anniversary interview, Walton was still responding to attempts to debunk or reinterpret the event. After 50 years, the argument had not ended. That alone is not proof of aliens, but it is proof that the evidence struck something deeper than a one-night rumor. The deeper question is not only where Travis Walton was, it is why this case refused to disappear. It survived because witnesses had names. It survived because there was a search. It survived because there was a return. And it survived because Walton's claimed memories did not fit neatly into any ordinary box. This case reminds us that the strongest mysteries are not always the ones with the loudest claims. Sometimes they are the ones with a documented beginning and an unfinished ending. But the Apache-Sitgreaves National Forests leave one question hanging in the trees. What kind of event makes 6 men run, return, and carry the story for the rest of their lives? I'm here to help you know the cases that still ask for evidence. Which part of the Travis Walton case matters most to you? The 6 crew witnesses, the polygraphs, or the missing 5 days? Keep looking up and keep asking what was left out.